Welcome back to the final round here on Yahoo Finance. Well, the airline industry is calling for another $25 billion to help it weather the downturn from the coronavirus pandemic. But the talks on the stimulus package that could include the aid for the industry remain stalled down in D.C. So for more on this and its potential impact, we have Sara Nelson. She's the president of the Association of Flight Attendants. And Sara, you have a recent op-ed that you wrote in the first line. You said Congress must act now or millions of more Americans are going to lose their jobs without a safety net to catch them. What do you think is needed or what is needed to keep the airline industry in place and for these people to keep their jobs right now?
Well, first and foremost, yes, we are advocating for the airline industry, but that's really for the airline industry workers. So back in March, we had the first Workers First package, and the relief that went to the airlines went to keeping people in their jobs, connected to our healthcare, connected to our benefits. The money can only go to paying workers pay and benefits. There is a ban on stock buybacks, a cap on executive compensation, a ban on dividends. And what this also did was it required service to continue to go to all of our small communities, because the airline industry is just back at 20% of demand that it was a year ago. No one can operate a business at that level. So keeping people on staff ready to lift off again when the virus is contained is important. If we don't extend this funding ends on September 30th, and the furlough notices are already out. So we know that there's going to be hundreds of thousands of aviation workers who lose their jobs without this extended funding. But we also know that the $600 that was the plus up for unemployment was propping up 5 million jobs, because people were spending back 73 cents of every dollar of that back into the economy and supporting other jobs. The state and local funding that we've been hearing about is to support public transportation jobs, sanitation, keeping rural hospitals open, making sure that we have teachers in place to teach the kids. It's all one big jobs program. And if Congress doesn't get this in place soon, we are going to have a tsunami of job loss. So you take those 5 million from the loss of the $600 unemployment, hundreds of thousands of aviation workers. The post office, we have to think about that. That's also 600,000 workers on the front lines of the post office if we're not shoring that up. And then another 5.3 million of state and local workers who wouldn't be supported because we don't have that funding there. If you also continue the hurt of PPP not being restored and those small businesses not being able to employ people, and the lack of demand for any kind of goods or services with an extended coronavirus, you're just talking about a continual loss of jobs. And for every job that is lost, it gets worse. Today, right now, for every job that's out there, 5 Americans are competing for that, and that is growing by the minute. 1 in 3 Americans is behind on their mortgage payments. And so we're also talking about a housing collapse as well.
Sara, can you just explain for our audience what is exactly happening in the airline industry? So planes are flying. They are serving most or maybe even all of the cities they served before, but it seems in some limited capacity. So are airlines flying smaller planes on the same routes? Are they flying fewer flights between cities? All of the above? How's it working really?
So all of the above. They've taken most of the jumbo jets out of service. Those are pretty much on the ground. So we've got generally smaller aircraft flying, and that's just in the domestic market. If you remember, we can't even fly to almost any other country in the world right now because the rest of the world doesn't trust Americans. So our U.S. passport is no good. That has an impact as well. And so, yes, it's smaller jets, it's less service. And what was required in March with the payroll support program was also that the airlines continue to serve all of our small communities. This relates also to the Postal Service, actually, because the Postal Service carries a lot of that mail in the belly of the aircraft. And when they don't have access to that, they've got to pay higher rates to get the mail into these small communities, and they may not even have service to do that. So there can be people who, if we don't have this extension of support to the airline worker jobs and prop up and keep intact the airline industry, we may actually not have a means for the post office to do its work and to deliver pharmaceuticals to some of our small and rural communities.
Question about flight attendants. You have to deal directly with passengers. Do you have everything you want in terms of rules requiring how passengers to wear masks and how they have to behave and everything like that? Or are there some friction points?
This has been the strangest thing that I have ever experienced in my 25 years on the job. I have never seen before that an administration has not put forward a plan to deal with an epidemic, communicable disease, pandemic. There is no plan in place and there's no instruction from the federal government. And so what we did was we really pushed our airlines to put some safety measures in place, like the mask policies. But what we're seeing, because we don't have that kind of federal backing, is that we have people coming and challenging that, and challenging whether or not they have to wear a mask, when in fact, just like smoking on a plane, you can't smoke because you're putting everyone's safety and health at risk. And if you do, you're going to be facing severe fines and possibly even some jail time. So we need to have backing to make sure that we're actually following rules in the airline industry to keep everyone safe, because it's a space where you cannot properly socially distance. And unless people feel confident that they're going to be safe when they buy an airplane ticket, they are not going to buy one.
Sara, how long do you think we need this support for the airlines and for the crews? If somebody said, okay, here, I'll write a check and you get 6 months, is that going to be enough? Because, the vaccine could be, a couple years up. I don't know when I'm going to go and travel again. And I say this as something, my grandfather was a pilot for an airline. I love flying. I don't think I'm going anywhere anytime soon. So are you talking years of supporting the airline industry?
Jen, you ask a really good question, because in March, when this was put together, this was for a 6-month period where everyone thought that we'd be in a different place with coronavirus, that we'd be able to take the steps to help to try to contain the virus, even if we don't have a vaccine yet. And there are countries that have successfully contained the virus because they've taken the steps to do that. We are not in that place at all. And so what we are proposing right now is an extension of another 6 months of this payroll support. That should get us closer to a vaccine. It should get us closer to a travel season where people actually want to travel. It should get us hopefully into a different administration that actually provides some leadership to the country and has a plan so that we can contain the virus and be in a place where people feel okay to fly. But really, this is a bridge. And let's also recognize that during that time, more people are going to qualify for Medicare, more people are going to qualify for their retirement, and you'll be able to naturally scale back on some of those ranks while keeping the industry in place and able to compete with the rest of the world as we start to ramp up again. Another 6 months is what we're asking for right now, and we think that that's appropriate based on where we are today and what we have to get through in the next 6 months. And we're very hopeful that by April 1st, we'll be in a very different place.
All right, Sara Nelson, president of the Association of Flight Attendants. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you.